Most people think respect comes from confidence, communication, or charisma, and while those things matter, they're not the foundation. Real respect, the kind that doesn't fade when you leave the room, comes from something much quieter. Consistency. Because anyone can look confident for a moment. Anyone can say the right words in the right situation, but very few people can show up day after day and do what they said they would do. That's where discipline changes everything. Think about how most people operate. They start strong, they get motivated, they make plans, but as soon as things become inconvenient, their standards begin to slip. They skip a day, they delay a task, they lower the effort just enough to stay comfortable. And over time, that inconsistency becomes visible. People might not call it out directly, but they notice. They notice when someone talks more than they execute. They notice when someone makes promises but doesn't follow through. They notice the gap between intention and action. That gap quietly erodes respect. Now compare that to someone who operates differently, someone who doesn't rely on motivation, someone who doesn't make excuses, someone who shows up whether they feel like it or not. At first, it doesn't seem dramatic. It's just small, consistent actions repeated over time. But those actions send a message that words never can. Reliability. When people see that you don't break your own standards, they start trusting your behavior. When you say you'll do something, they believe it. Not because you convince them, but because you've proven it repeatedly. And that proof builds respect. Not the loud kind that comes with attention. The quiet kind that comes with trust. But here's where it gets deeper. Discipline isn't just about doing tasks. It's about how you carry yourself when things get difficult. Most people are consistent when it's easy. They work when they're motivated. They stay focused when nothing is pulling them away. But pressure reveals the truth. When things get hard, do you stay steady? When progress slows down, do you keep going? When nobody is watching, do you still follow through? That's what people notice, because discipline under pressure is rare, and rare behavior always stands out. Over time, this creates a shift. You're no longer seen as someone who tries. You're seen as someone who executes. And once that perception forms, respect starts building naturally, without you ever asking for it. Assist to understand why discipline earns respect, you have to look at what most people struggle with internally. It's not a lack of knowledge. It's not a lack of opportunity. It's the inability to stay consistent when things become uncomfortable. Everyone has moments of clarity, moments where they know exactly what they should be doing, but when it's time to act, something interferes. Distraction, doubt, laziness, emotion. And in that moment, most people negotiate with themselves. I'll do it later. I'll start tomorrow. I just don't feel like it right now. Those small decisions seem harmless, but they build a pattern where comfort slowly becomes more important than progress. Now imagine someone who doesn't follow that pattern. Someone who acts even when it's inconvenient. Someone who follows through even when it's boring. Someone who maintains standards even when nobody is watching. That kind of behavior stands out immediately because it's rare, and rarity creates value. When people observe that level of discipline, they begin to recognize something different. They see that your actions are not controlled by mood. They see that your standards don't change depending on how you feel. And that consistency sends a powerful signal. It shows that you can be trusted, not just with small things, but with responsibility, with pressure, with outcomes that actually matter. And that's where respect deepens, because respect isn't just about how you appear. It's about how dependable you are. People don't truly respect someone who only performs when it's easy. They respect the person who stays steady when things become difficult, the one who doesn't disappear when challenges show up, the one who doesn't make excuses when expectations are high. There's also a psychological effect happening here. When someone sees you maintaining discipline, it forces them to reflect on their own behavior. They notice where they fall short. They notice where they quit early. And without you saying anything, your actions create a comparison. That comparison creates pressure. Not because you're trying to compete, but because consistency exposes inconsistency. And that exposure makes people adjust how they see you. They stop taking you lightly. They stop assuming you'll bend or break under pressure. They begin to treat you with a level of seriousness that wasn't there before, all because of one thing. You did what most people don't. You stayed consistent. The final level of discipline is when it becomes part of your identity, not something you have to think about. At the beginning, you have to remind yourself to stay consistent. You have to push through resistance. You have to fight the urge to take the easier path. But over time, that resistance weakens. The habits solidify, and discipline becomes automatic. You don't question whether you'll show up. You don't debate whether you'll follow through. You simply do it. And that's when your presence starts to change. Because now it's not just about what you achieve, it's about how you operate. People begin to notice that you move with a different level of control. You don't rush, you don't panic, you don't get thrown off by small distractions, you stay steady. And that steadiness creates trust. But it also creates distance. Not in a negative way, but in a way that separates you from the average pattern most people follow. While others are inconsistent, emotional, and reactive, you remain structured, focused, and reliable. That contrast is powerful, because people don't just respect results, they respect behavior they can't easily replicate. And consistent discipline is one of those behaviors. It requires self-control, patience, and the ability to delay comfort in favor of long-term progress. Most people understand it, but very few actually live it. So when they see someone who does, it stands out immediately. They begin to adjust how they interact with you. They listen more carefully. They take your words more seriously. They hesitate before making assumptions about you, not because you demanded respect, but because your actions created it. There's also something deeper happening. When discipline becomes identity, you stop needing external pressure to perform. You don't need deadlines to act. You don't need supervision to stay focused. You don't need validation to keep going. You operate from internal standards. And those standards don't change. That's what makes you dependable in a way most people aren't, because your behavior isn't influenced by circumstances. It's guided by principle. And over time, that consistency builds a reputation that speaks for you. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to prove anything repeatedly. People already know how you operate. And that's the highest level of respect. Not attention, not praise, but trust in your consistency. Because once people trust that you will always follow through, they don't question you anymore. They rely on you. And that's when discipline stops being just a habit. It becomes your identity, and your identity becomes your power.